Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
The introduction. On a brisk November morning in 2018, the small town of Maplewood awoke to the sounds of sirens cutting through the crisp air, a stark contrast to the usual chirping of birds heralding the dawn. It was a sleepy suburb, characterized by tree-lined streets and the familiar wave of neighbors heading to work. But that day, an unsettling tension hung in the air, thick and foreboding. At 7:15 a.m., a jogger making their usual route along Oak Street stumbled upon a scene that would haunt the community for years to come. A body lay twisted among the early fallen leaves, partially hidden beneath a tattered blue tarp, discolored and lifeless. It presented a grim tableau against the backdrop of a serene park, where families would typically gather for picnics and laughter. The jogger, paralyzed with shock, quickly dialed 911, breathlessly relaying the situation. As officers arrived on the scene, they exchanged grim glances. The victim was a local 34-year-old teacher named Rachel Hart, beloved by her students and the kind of neighbor who would bring cookies to your doorstep. Her death sent shockwaves through Maplewood, a place where crime was often the subject of evening gossip rather than reality. As detectives combed through the scene, they noted signs of a broken bracelet sparkling amidst the leaves' sand, the presence of a peculiar note tucked into her waistband. Nothing seemed to align. It was as if the quaint surroundings mocked the horror unfolding. The investigation that would follow would unearth secrets hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect community, forever altering the lives of those who call Maplewood home. The victim, Rachel Hart, was more than just a name on a police report. She was a vibrant thread in the intricate tapestry of Maplewood. Born and raised in the town, her roots ran deep, stretching back to a family that had nurtured close ties with the community. As a dedicated elementary school teacher, Rachel's life revolved around her students, and she tended to their growth with the same care she offered her garden at home. Colleagues remembered her as a passionate educator who often stayed late to organize after-school programs and mentor struggling families. The classrooms she managed were brimming with creativity. Colorful posters adorned the walls, each telling a story of student journeys. Even on the toughest days, Rachel's laughter resonated, making chaotic moments feel lighter. At home, she was an engaged neighbor and a supportive friend. On weekends, she organized book clubs at the local library and often volunteered to help orchestrate community events. Her evenings were spent curled up with a good novel, sharing stories with her beloved golden retriever, Bella, or catching up with her close-knit circle of friends over steaming mugs of coffee. But beneath her vibrant exterior lay a complexity known only to those closest to her. Rachel had recently weathered a painful breakup, leaving her grappling with loneliness that sometimes cast a shadow over her sunny disposition. The whispered concerns of friends often fell on deaf ears. She had always been the one people turned to for help. As detectives delved deeply into Rachel's life, friends and family painted a picture of a woman adored by many but burdened by her own hidden battles. In the days to follow, authorities would learn that the delicate surface of Maplewood held a murkier underbelly, and Rachel's murder was just the beginning of unveiling the town's darkest secrets. The crime scene. The air was thick with tension as detectives examined the crime scene on Oak Street, a place where laughter once echoed among families. Now it lay under a forensic tent, marked off with yellow tape that warned onlookers to stay away. Officers cordoned off a 20-foot perimeter, their hushed tones capturing the gravity of the situation as they strategized their next steps. Beneath that soft blue tar, Rachel's body was a haunting sight. Her once vibrant clothing, now dulled and smeared with the grime of the earth, matched the horror etched across her face. A forensic investigator knelt beside her, gently lifting the tarp that obscured the truth. Every detail was meticulously observed: the angle of her limbs, the bruising around her throat, and the way her hair lay matted against the ground. An unsettling silence fell over the investigative team. They all understood they were witnessing more than just a murder. They were peering into a shattered life. Near her hand, the broken bracelet shimmered cruelly in the morning light, its metallic glint defiant against the grim surroundings. It was just one piece of evidence, among many. But the significance was not lost on the seasoned investigator. As they scanned the ground, they discovered the peculiar note, faded and crumpled, almost hidden. One detective gingerly retrieved it, careful not to disturb the surrounding area, while another began capturing photos that would later serve as crucial pieces of the time. The note revealed barely legible words, hastily scrawled as if the writer's hand trembled. "He should have stayed away." A chilling phrase that produced a ripple of concern among those who read it. The detectives exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the implications. This was no random act of violence. It bore signs of intention, something personal. As the morning progressed, the investigation shifted gears, from simply gathering evidence to unearthing the life Rachel had led. With each clue uncovered, they felt the weight of the community's heartbreak hanging overhead. A town on edge, desperate for answer. Emotions ran high. They knew they had to tread carefully, for whoever was responsible might lurk around them undetected, weaving through the shattered fabric of life in Maplewood. Early investigation. As the sun began to ascend higher in the sky, the gravity of Rachel's murder took root in the town of Maplewood, leaving its inhabitants in a state of disbelief. The police department quickly established a command center at the local community hall, where detectives began the painstaking process of piecing together Rachel's final out. Early leads suggested that Rachel had attended a book club meeting the evening before her death, hosted at the quaint library just down the street from her home. Members described a lively discussion, albeit tinged with an undercurrent of concern. Rachel had alluded to feeling watched, though it was unclear if she was joking or genuinely troubled. Detectives wasted no time in gathering the book club members for questioning, desperately seeking to understand if the subtle hints had been mere paranoia or a prelude to the deadly encounter that awaited her. As they conducted interviews, it became evident that Rachel had recently rekindled a friendship with a former classmate, Mark Sullivan. The two had grown close again after separate struggles. While initially supportive, whispers of discontent began to surface. Jealousy sliced through their rekindled connection as Rachel voiced doubts about their compatibility. Was Mark's newfound irritation a reason for concern? Detectives pursued the line of questioning, attempting to gauge his whereabouts on the night of Rachel's death. Meanwhile, forensic teams processed Rachel's home, hoping to uncover something that might lead them to her killer. They meticulously combed through personal belongings, journals filled with her thoughts, receipts from recent purchases, and digital footprints on her smartphone. The search brought to light a disturbing pattern. An unknown number had lingered in her call log, a shadowy presence that evoked unease. As new leads emerged, Maplewood's residents remained trapped in a web of fear and uncertainty. Neighbors exchanged anxious glances, wary of the threat that now loomed silently among them. The morning the news broke had sent ripples through the town, but the growing realization that someone among them harbored malevolence was more unnerving than any ghost. As evidence mounted, the detectives knew they were on the brink of discovering the truth. Yet they also understood that the darker the truth, the more it would demand from them and from the heart of Maplewood itself. The dead ends. Days turned into a blur for the investigators assigned to the Rachel Hart case. Each passing hour filled with fleeting hope juxtaposed against crushing disappointment. Clues surfaced, like whispers in the wind, only to dissolve into elusive shadows before they could grasp their significance. Despite relentless effort, each lead seemed to spiral into a dead end, deepening the frustration shared not only by the team but the entire community of Maplewood. Detectives interviewed Mark Sullivan multiple times. At first, he appeared shaken, a grieving friend who struggled to understand how things had gone so horribly wrong. However, with each session they noticed subtle shifts in his demeanor. Nervous tics, evasive answers, and inconsistencies embroidered into his state. He claimed he was busy that evening, attending to personal matters outside of town, but could offer no solid alibi or discernible proof. The more they pressed, the more his story felt like a fragile facade. But without definitive evidence, he remained just a person of interest trapped in a web of suspicion. Meanwhile, the unanswered fate of the mysterious number lingered in the background, piquing their curiosity further. Analysts began tracing its origin, but it spiraled into an untraceable abyss, a deadline disconnected, as if the number had belonged to a ghost, further fueling the psychological strain that hung like a cloud over the detectives. The relentless pursuit of Rachel's friends for clues also fell short. Promises of loyalty turned into roadblocks. Friendships soured under pressure. Someone had covered for someone else. An unspoken pact of silence that left investigators feeling like intruders probing a wound that had yet to fully heal. Frustration bubbled among the team as they sat in their command center, surrounded by corkboards filled with photographs, timelines, and notice an intricate puzzle waiting to be solved. Detective Sarah Jensen stared at Rachel's smiling face, bridging a chasm between the victim and the cases that lay scattered around her. "There's something we're missing," she murmured, determination etching lines on her brow. But with each passing hour, the growing sense of urgency began to morph into despair. The clock was ticking. With a community torn between mourning and fear, the stakes were mounting, and as they sifted through a morass of false leads and concealed truths, the investigators understood they were racing against time, a compounded reality where the threat of the unknown lurked less than a shadow away, waiting to strike again. A break in the case. As the days dragged on into a second week, the initial fervor surrounding the investigation was fading. Conversations at local coffee shops shifted from shock to speculation, and the town of Maplewood began to murmur about moving on, though the wound of Rachel's murder had yet to close. But within the confines of the command center, Detective Sarah Jensen and her dedicated team remained vigilant. It was on a quiet Thursday morning that a glimmer of hope sparked their attention. An envelope arrived, marked with an unfamiliar return address. inside was a letter that would change the course of their investigation. With shaking hands, Sarah unfolded the typed letter. The sender claimed to have witnessed Rachel on the night of her murder, stating they had seen an altercation in the park just before her death. What caught their attention most was the vivid description of a figure, a tall, dark-haired man, eerily similar to Mark Sullivan's build, engaged in a heated discussion with Rachel. The witness had been walking home from work, a mere 10 feet away, but when they tried to intervene, they were met with threats. Terrified, they fled, resolving to come forward only when they felt safe enough. Armed with this new information, Sarah wasted no time. She dispatched officers to canvass the area surrounding the park, looking for any additional witnesses or security footage that might corroborate the stunning claim. Hours of door-knocking bore fruit. A local shopkeeper remembered seeing 2 silhouettes in the park that night. Security cam footage revealed a breaching glimpse of movement, although too obscure to identify. Back at the station, tension thickened. The renewed leads injected a contagious adrenaline into their work. Detectives pored over the footage again, watching intently for any signs that might hint at the identity of the dark-haired man. It was a race against time. They needed to bring Mark Sullivan in for questioning once more, this time with renewed vigor and purpose. As the team prepared their approach, Sarah couldn't shake a chill that curled around her spine. The interwoven threads of the community and the investigation were beginning to unravel, exposing underlying tensions that had lain dormant too long. They were within reach of the truth, but what lay beyond, buried beneath relationships and secrets, was anyone's guess. Every moment brought them closer to uncovering the truth, but as they honed in on the suspect, they braced themselves for the deeper, darker implication. Rachel's murder was no longer just a tragedy. It was a portal into the unknown depths of betrayal. And they were ready to face whatever secrets Maplewood had kept hidden away for far too long. A suspect. With the weight of the new evidence bearing down on them, the detectives gathered in a small conference room, faces set with determination. Mark Sullivan's name loomed large. He had become their prime suspect, the man whose connection to Rachel might hold the key to her untimely death. Gathering records of his past, they discovered that Mark wasn't just another name on a list. He was entwined with Rachel's history, a fact that made his motivations more complex, layered with intimacy and resentment. Detective Sarah Jensen chose to approach him solo, hoping to squeeze out the truth before the tides turned against him. Mark sat nervously in the interrogation room, hands fidgeting on the table as Sarah established eye contact, her demeanor calm yet authoritative. She noted the way his gaze darted, as if fearful of confronting the shadows that lurked behind his work. They commenced with casual conversation, allowing him to lower his guard. But as she expertly shifted the narrative towards Rachel, the mood in the room darkened. Mark spoke of their rekindled friendship, a certain tenderness in his voice, yet the hints of jealousy peeked through. Sarah dove into their last encounters, questioning their emotions, trying to gauge the veracity of his alibi for the night of Rachel's murder. The moment she mentioned the anonymous witness, Mark's demeanor shifted. A flash of defensiveness darkened his features and he leaned back, crossing his arms. "I had nothing to do with it," he insisted, his voice sharp. "I was home that night." A lull, the impossibility of his alibi weighed heavy. Without evidence to prove otherwise, it hung uncomfortably in the air. Slowly, Sarah laid down the similarities. The dark-haired figure, The altercation in the park, as she did, and Mark's eyes flickered with something akin to panic. The urgency in her tone escalated, drawing him further into a corner. "You need to understand I cared about Rachel," he stammered. "But she was moving. I just wanted her to remember who she was." Those words hung between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Did he mean that as a threat? Time slipped away, reflexes heightened. Every second felt like a charge, electricity crackling, as Sarah weighed the implications of his admission against the evidence they had. As she ended the session, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were teetering on the edge of a precipice. Mark was caught in a snare of emotion. Anger, love, betrayal intertwined into a dangerous cocktail. They would need to apply pressure to test just how far he would go when faced with the heat of the truth. The deeper they probed into his psyche, the more urgent it felt to unravel everything tied to Rachel's life, each thread pulling them closer to unveiling a web of fear and desperation that had intertwined their lives. In Maplewood, nothing was ever as it seemed, and the search for the truth might just risk unraveling everything they held dear. The trial. The atmosphere inside the historic Maplewood courtroom was electric, charged with tension as the community gathered to witness the trial of Mark Sullivan. The once vibrant town had been shrouded in sorrow since Rachel Hart's murder, and now as the proceedings unfolded, emotions bubbled to the surface. Family, friends, and neighbors filled every bench, a silent testament to Rachel's life and the impact of her untimely death. As the trial began, the state's case centered on circumstantial evidence and emotional testimony, weaving a narrative that connected the dots between Mark and Rachel. Prosecutors outlined the timeline of events leading up to the murder. They brought forth the anonymous witness, shakingly recounting their anxiety-laden night in the park, corroborating Sarah Jensen's detailed notes of the dark-haired figure. The jury leaned forward, captivated by the tragic story that unfolded before them. Mark's defense team, a seasoned duo well-versed in courtroom theatrics, artfully dismantled the prosecution's claims. They pounced on the lack of physical evidence linking Mark to the crime scene, skillfully painting him as a heartbroken man, wrongly accused of taking his beloved's life. The jury was reminded of Rachel's colorful personality and her history of complicated relationships, suggesting there could be other suspects lurking in the shadows. Unintended consequences of her vibrant connections in the community. Emotions ran high as Mark took the stand, his face a mask of vulnerability and grief. Rigidly rebuffing accusations, he portrayed himself as an unwilling victim of circumstance, a scapegoat in a community desperate for closure. The tears he shed as he spoke of Rachel resonated with some jurors, while others exchanged skeptical glances, uncertain of his sincerity. And as testimonies unfolded, the courtroom was ripe with tension, reminiscent of the small-town swirl of friendship, jealousy, and fear. The line separating justice and vengeance blurred as family members of Rachel whispered to one another, their pain palpable, sparking mirrors when Mark's past relationship surfaced. Midway through the trial, the jury was called for a recess, and as attendees filed out, hushed conversations filled the hall. Whispers of doubt began circulating around Mark's character and his previous obsession that had trailed him like a heavy shadow. Could love twist into hate? Was jealousy capable of breaching the line between passion and bile? Outside the courthouse, the air was thick with uncertainty. As the community stood divided, some believed in Mark's innocence, while others clung to the notion that justice for Rachel was well within reach. The narrative was no longer solely about the day she was taken, but rather a reflection on the bonds of friendship and the hidden devastation that jealousy can unleash. As the jury returned for closing arguments, Sarah Jensen settled into her seat, heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. The fragile fabric of Maplewood had been torn apart by tragedy, and she understood that no matter the outcome, their lives would never be the same. Mark had stirred the truth from his slumber, but the final threads were waiting to be woven, pulling the community back into their painful past, while inching toward the jagged edges of an uncertain future. The aftermath. The verdict reverberated through the courtroom like a bell tolling in the distance, each clang summoning waves of emotion that spilled into the hearts of those present. Mark Sullivan had been found guilty of the murder of Rachel Hart, a decision that brought some semblance of relief to her family, but left a gaping hole in the fabric of Maplewood. As the judge pronounced the sentence, a murmur swept through the gallery, the mix of gasps, sobs, and whispers that echoed against the historical walls. In the weeks following the trial, the ramifications of Mark's conviction rippled throughout the community. Maplewood grappled with the aftershocks of betrayal and fear as they processed the dark truth of one of their own. Questions lingered in the air like smoke, unfurling into conversations that split friendships and strained relationships. Neighbors who knew each other for years found themselves on opposing sides, struggling to reconcile their beliefs of the reality that lay bare in the courtroom's judgment. Sarah Jensen felt the weight of the town's sorrow even after the case concluded. She took long walks through the same park where Rachel's life had been cruelly extinguished. The memories tangible yet painful. Sometimes she spotted children laughing and playing, their innocent joy, a stark contrast to the tragedy that had unfolded in their midst. Each step reminded her of the many lives intertwined with Rachel's, each thread frayed by loss, and she vowed to hold tight to her mission of safeguarding that innocence. A memorial held in Rachel's honor attracted a sea of residents. The turnout, a testament to the love she had infused into lives around her. Candles flickered in the encroaching darkness as shared stories of her warmth and kindness filled the night air. In that moment of collective mourning, Maplewood rediscovered a sense of unity that had been overshadowed by anger and despair. Meanwhile, Mark's life unraveled behind the prison walls, a stark contrast to the vibrant life he once knew. His conviction left him haunted, lingering in the shadows of regret. His dreams of rekindling a bond with Rachel had ultimately led to a nightmare neither had anticipated. Behind bars, he began penning letters detailing his turmoil, artists of remorse bleeding onto paper. Hearts hardened by pain yet softened by understanding found solace in sharing their thoughts through an underground community that emerged around Mark's story, turning criminal sympathy into a manifesto of grievance. As months passed, the pain of Rachel's absence persisted, but so did the quiet strength of those she loved. Maplewood began to heal, reconstructed by a shared commitment to prevent another tragedy from unfolding. Schools initiated programs focused on mental health and coping strategies, fostering openness where there had been silence. Community members began reaching out, forming support groups not just for victims, but for those living under the shadow of despair, a testament to Rachel's enduring legacy of care. The road ahead was still fraught with trepidation and residual heartache. The memory of Rachel Hart hung like a ghost, a reminder of love, betrayal, and a community's strength to come together in the face of darkness. In the years that followed, the town of Maplewood transformed, marking an era of resilience, each whispered confession, each candle lit in her memory, a thread binding them closer together against the specter of violence that had once threatened to tear them apart. Through it all, they emerged resolute, determined to honor Rachel's spirit by cherishing the beauty that life has to offer, one day at a time. Reflection. As the years rolled on, the landscape of Maplewood shifted beneath the weight of its shared history. The sun rose each day over the town, illuminating its charms, while casting long shadows where grief still lingered. In quiet moments, Sarah Denson found herself haunted by memories of Rachel Hart, her bright smile forever etched in the recesses of her mind. Every decision she made in her work was influenced by that haunting loss, igniting a passion within her to foster a safer, kinder community. Before long, the annual memorial event expanded beyond simple remembrance. It became a day devoted to community outreach and awareness. Each year, family and friends gathered not only to honor Rachel, but to advocate for changes in mental health resources, empowering individuals to voice their struggles before tragedy struck. The shadows of loss transformed into beacons of light and hope,